amongst everybody here. We are here because we have issues up in Alberta, Northern Alberta specifically, when we talk about Treaty 8. There's been discussions around the Alberta-Canada MOU in which we haven't been privy to. We haven't been communicated with. There's no consultation. And we see a direct infringement on our treaty rights when we talk about how we're supposed to be dealt with in our territories. As we know, the recently announced Canada-Alberta MOU and pipeline initiative were done with zero consultation, zero notice, and zero involvement of the First Nations of Treaty 8. This is a breach of our Treaty Number 8, a breach of Canada's constitutional obligations, and a breach of the honour of the Crown. Treaty rights and Crown obligations. Let us be clear that Canada cannot delegate its treaty responsibilities to Alberta or industry. The Imperial Crown entered Treaty Number 8 with our ancestors. That responsibility is non-delegible. No government or federal or provincial can negotiate, approve, or commit to the development on Treaty 8 lands without the direct involvement and consent of the Treaty 8 First Nations. Our nations are not stakeholders. We are rights holders with sovereignty, jurisdiction, and authority over our lands and waters. Canada and Alberta announced the MOU and the pipeline affecting our treaty territory without informing the nations. This is unacceptable. We expect Canada to ensure meaningful consultation takes place in Alberta, not after deals are signed, but before any decisions are made. We are asking Canada to stop turning a blind eye to how Alberta and industry operate in our territory. Ottawa must pay attention. Ottawa must insist on proper lawful consultation. The Prime Minister committed this to us at the Prime Minister's Summit in Ottawa past July, yet we haven't seen the words put into action. For years, Alberta and industry have made decisions on our lands with minimal or no engagement. This must end. Canada has a duty to monitor and ensure that Alberta does not bypass treaty rights, jurisdiction, or consent. We are urging the federal government today, watch what the province of Alberta is doing. Watch how industry operates. Watch how our rights continue to be minimized. Our lands and waters are already facing cumulative impacts from decades of development. Another major project, another MOU done without consent only deepens the harm and increases Canada's legal exposure. We have formally notified the Prime Minister that any further attempt by Canada, Alberta, or industry to move ahead without us will result in immediate action. Those actions will include willfully withdrawing cooperation from joint initiatives, fully exercising our treaty, constitutional, political, and legal mechanisms to defend our sovereignty. We are demanding that all actions stemming from this MOU and pipeline announcement be paused immediately until our free, prior, and informed consent is obtained. If this country believes in reconciliation, in treaty implementation, in respect for Indigenous rights, then the federal government must uphold its highest legal and moral obligation. Treaty 8 First Nations will not allow decisions about our lands and our future to be made without us. It's very important to note that communication between the individual sovereign nations is key. If there's going to be any development in our territories, we have to understand, and the governments, industry have to understand that the business of consultation has to be done at the forefront before any announcements are made. Every nation must be consulted. It's a part of who we are. It's our territories, and when we're receiving information or news media releases about MOUs that are affecting our territory, we have a real problem with it, and we will deal with it accordingly. Thank you. Is there questions here or later?
Somebody else needs to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Chief Billy Joe Tucker with Miksuk Cree First Nation. I recently was in a meeting with some other chiefs from Treaty 6, 7, and 8 and with the Prime Minister, and I had made it known on that day that that it was unacceptable that they were signing an MOU with Alberta and Canada and without even engaging with the Treaty 8 nations. Those resources that they are talking about are coming from the Treaty 8 region, and for that to go ahead without us is totally unacceptable. We have a lot of outstanding issues in the northern region of Alberta, and one of the main reasons is the treat and release. They're trying to push that, and for these major projects of interest to go ahead, they're going to need to do something with those treated tailings ponds, and they're not putting them into the Athabasca River. By them going to expedite major projects is totally unacceptable on behalf of the people in Fort Chip. So with that, Carney, Premier Smith, you guys need to get yourselves in order and come and speak to the people that these resources that their lands lie on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheldon Sunshine. I'm Chief of Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation Treaty 8 Territory. And I just want to speak to the recent MOU and how it's problematic for our people. We've seen over the last few years here where the province of Alberta is creating legislations that are hostile to First Nations treaty rights. And when we're talking about development and the impacts it's going to have on the environment, whether it's water or all the resources that they're talking about, like Chief said, it's coming out of our territory. And dealing with some of the impacts health-wise, and we see the devastation out in the territories. You know, we have the abandoned wells issue, and it's just increasing. So when you're talking about creating an MOU to fast-track some of these projects, it's going to fast-track the demise of our people. So that's why when we hear about this MOU, and we want to be consulted first and foremost before anything happens. And you know, we're not against development. What we want is participation, inclusion at the forefront, so that we could have our concerns mitigated, and then maybe support some of these projects if our concerns are mitigated. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Terry Villeburn. I'm acting chief for the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. I'm glad to be on the territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin. Thank you, Treaty 8 Grand Chief Trevor Mercredi and our other chiefs for their remarks. On behalf of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, we want to say to the Prime Minister Carney that we say no. No to increasing production of tar sands by 100 million barrels a day. No to increasing toxic tailings in our backyard. No to lifting the tanker ban on the West Coast, and no to Pathways carbon capture, and no to the MOU within Alberta. We stand in solidarity with the Coastal First Nations, and Prime Minister Carney would have known this if he had bothered consulting us. Our treaty is not a bargaining chip for you to sell out Canada. All of Alberta is treaty land, and you can't have an agreement with Alberta that excludes us. We who are standing here today have stopped Alberta from separating, and we will stop this MOU from being enacted. Masicho.
Is there any questions for?
Yeah, first name, APTN News. The Prime Minister keeps saying that none of these projects will go forward, that it's just setting the groundwork. Close often after announcement has been made without consultation, as you say. Do you take him at his word that the government will not let these go forward without consent?
Well, Prime Minister Carney and the province have to understand that things have to be done fundamentally different from the past. And when the nations talk about being communicated with or consulted, it's very important that before these announcements are made, that the governments reach out to the individual nations and at least make them aware of the public MOUs and all these deals that are being made without our people at the table. And why that's important is because, as the chief said, that the resources are coming from Treaty 8 territory. The impacts are in Treaty 8 territory. There's many cumulative impacts that are not dealt with responsibly today in Alberta. When we talk about the orphan wells, we talk about the tailings, we talk about logging and land sales and all these things. It's really that Alberta is out of control. And it's up to us to keep Alberta in control and making sure that they adhere to the duty to consult and make sure that our nations are fully consulted right from the start of these projects so we could avoid these issues. If they would have reached out and talked to each and every nation like they should, we would be avoiding this problem because they would understand our issues and find a way to move forward. So, we're really looking for that communication to be ramped up. We do push at every level to make sure that that initiative is spoken about when we talk about communication and how important it is.
Now, that's my next question, as I know that after the fact, of course, they've committed to meetings with the Coastal First Nations and BC government. You met with him, a couple of you met with him last week. Did you get a commitment that he plans to do a broader consultation with the Alberta First Nations?
Well, what we've been pushing for a number of months now is to have a direct conversation with our chiefs of Treaty 8 and Prime Minister Carney to deal with these issues. So what we're looking for is meetings for them to beef up the regulatory processes within Alberta when we talk about water and releases and these types of other issues that we're facing. Because we can't really move forward in a good way when the cumulative impacts and the impacts of industry are still there and present and not being taken care of today. In Alberta, we have a massive drought that's going on, and industry is using a large portion of that water unrestricted. We have MOUs and legislation coming forward from Premier Smith and the UCP that is, like Chief Sunshine had mentioned, it's very hostile to our people. So we're looking for a way forward. However, it has to be on our terms and be respectful of what our people are looking for.
Did they seem open to that, or planning something like that?
Yeah, they're always open to communicating. However, we haven't nailed down a date yet, and we're looking for a meeting with him in the new year.
Natasha Malowski, Canada's National Observer. Just on, you mentioned concerns about resources, including water. I'm wondering if you've given any thought to the Pathways CCS project and the potential strain that would put on water resources in your regions.
Well, it's very concerning because I'm not sure if I haven't heard of any nation that supports the Pathways projects. We're hearing a lot about it. There's a lot of pushback from the nations that are impacted by the project. And once again, the science behind it is not all that sound. There's issues with Pathways and what they're looking forward on when they're implementing these ideas. We have to fully understand what the project is. We have to understand the impacts. We have to understand the remediation and the long-term impacts of our people so we could adjust ourselves accordingly.
And you mentioned earlier that you'll be looking at taking action if this pattern continues. You also mentioned potentially withdrawing from certain joint initiatives. I was just wondering if you have any examples of what those could be.
Well, there's many examples of coordinated efforts. We try to work with the province as much as we can. However, it's very difficult to move one step forward when we're being pushed 2 steps back in every instance that we're taking. So the relationship with the province of Alberta hasn't been very productive. It's just something that we're working on. However, when we have the UCP and Daniel Smith consistently and constantly pushing back on the rights of our people and telling us that if we don't like it, maybe we should litigate, that's what we'll do. So that's some things that we're really looking at is preparing ourselves for litigation, preparing ourselves for political activism, and also getting our grassroots people aware of the issues that we're facing so we could also look at that. And
a question for everyone. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, especially at the federal level, about trying to advance like equity, ownership, things like that when it comes to major projects to try and, make sure that there's benefits for First Nations and Indigenous communities. I know that it's tough when there aren't necessarily specific proposals, but I'm just wondering for each of you how an equity proposal would potentially change things or shape how you're approaching projects.
With the potential for these new projects, I could only speak for Mi'kmaq Cree First Nation, but there's no way that we can compound the issues that's already going on with our people. And that's our health. Since 93 to 2022, we've had 149 cases of cancer in our community. And we've also had some of the rarest forms of cancer as well. And we haven't received the data from 2022 to current AHS hasn't provided that to us, and I'm seeing a direct link with the Imperial incident of 2022, because there's been a big influx of, I would say, closer to 60 more people been diagnosed since I've been the chief. So there's no way that I could stand here and say, let's add to this issue, because I'm going to ask each and every one of you guys and the rest of Canada, if your house is on fire, would you add more wood to it? There's no way. We need to fix what's going on in northern Alberta right now. Daniel Smith's aware of this. Industry is aware of this. Carney is aware of this. We need to fix the health problem in my community, and that's by our people seeing adequate physicians in an adequate time period, not 4 or 5 months behind when they're being diagnosed with third or fourth stage cancer. It's totally unacceptable. We need to fix what's broken now, and I've told Carney this many times. I've told Daniel Smith this too. We need to fix what's broken, then we can talk about going forward, but it's got to be collectively and consulted with each individual nation. There's no way 1 or 2 nations can speak on the collective of each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to speak to some of those projects. You mentioned the Pathways project. That's just one major project, the oil sands. We got talk of data centers, lithium projects, lithium deposits, and all of those things have huge impacts. You know, the issues that they're facing up in Mikisew, some of these projects that are going to continue in the fashion that they are with the legislations that are being developed in Alberta, as well as the C5, where they're going to fast track consultation and all those things. You know, we're going to see increased issues for all of our communities, and not only for us. It's going to be the Albertans, the Canadians that are going to feel those impacts as well. So when you talk about the equity portion, really that is not reconciliation. That's buying into a project and project specific, and you might get benefits for whatever amount of time those projects are enacted, whether it's through procurement or what have you. Some of the things that we have to start the discussion is, we need to talk about certainty. You know, we signed a treaty, our ancestors signed a treaty with the understanding that we're going to share this land, share the resources. That's where we have to start. You know, we have a process that's been failing us. The consultation process has been failing us in Alberta big time. You can see it with Mikisew and all of their data. And yet, what process are they going to use? Are they going to use that same process for some of these major projects? And we're going to see even more increased failure for our people. And the impacts on our health is going to be enormous. So, you know, with cost of living going up in everybody's territory, you know, our people are starting to go back to the land, start to harvest the way we lived our lives, but we can't because there's so much development. And so that creates added pressures on us. So thank you. I just want to make sure that.
Thank you.
We have time for one final question.
We still have time. You want to ask a question?
I don't know if you wanted to make a comment to that.
Yeah, I kind of was going to make a comment on that part. Councillor Mike Mercredi of the Athabasca Chippewa First Nations. The thing that's brought up with that is kind of very important is that the First Nations in Canada right now are part of the 21st century. Having pipelines and proponents and making deals is nothing new to us. We've done this for several decades. This wouldn't be our first pipeline that we have to do some engagements on and some proper consultations. We've had proper accommodations in the past with the proponents and with the federal governments and provincial governments. This is not happening now. They seem to be changing the way they want to do business with us, and that's why we're kind of shocked that they decided to do this without our consultation, without having us at the table at the time. One of the messages that's coming from their own federal cabinets here in Ontario is that if Carney and Smith had actually sat with the First Nations first to talk about this pipeline and how it goes forth, the probability would have been that the First Nations would have been the one that announced it, along with them. And how that would look would be probably getting everybody on board to say, why did they do that? What kind of deal in there that actually convinced them to do otherwise? And this is what we want. We want all the eyes on this. We want everybody to look at this in a proper way so that we're done and dealt with in the most respectful way. Because anything that follows a treaty along with anything with the federal government has to go and are obligated to. And we only come to this because we haven't been consulted properly with. And going against what's happening to our people, our graveyards are getting full, our waters are getting low, our birds are falling into their tailings. They're talking about treat and release after acknowledging a Clean Water Act. That's kind of contradictory to what exactly is going on if they're putting a Clean Water Act and want to treat and release. They really can't do both. So they have to come to a conclusion about how exactly they want to deal with that with First Nations and their proponents. And like I said, we've done deals before. This is nothing new for First Nations and the proponents to have agreements together to move forward. We've done this before. This is nothing new. And in order to do so again, they have to come to the table with us so that we walk forward. And we can't walk where we keep watching them go without us. Causes us to kind of stand here and come to the nation's capital to make our statements like this and in hopes that the general public sees that we do want to be part of the 21st century and the rest of Canada's walk forward. I hope that helps answer some of that, because all along across the whole board with First Nations from the West Coast to the East Coast, we all share the exact same sentiment. Consultation first, and then we could move forward. Simple, easy. We would avoid a lot of this confrontation, a lot of these things that are going on. And the one thing with First Nations in the courts, we have a very good track record of winning. So thank you.
Yes, hi. My question is for the Grand Chief. I'm Aya Dufour. I report for iPolitics. The MOU, it paves the way for a potential pipeline or the carbon capture project to have a national interest status. That would involve the Major Projects Office. So I wonder how you approach that as a member of the Indigenous Advisory Council, and if you've brought it up with some of your peers on that council.
Well, with the Indigenous Advisory Council, we make sure that we don't consult on behalf of the nations. We do not talk to the proponents, and we do not talk to government on their side of things. It's very important to distinguish the fact that the IAC is put there in place to help facilitate on how they're supposed to move forward. The terms of reference haven't been finalized yet. That's what we're working on right now. And so it's kind of concerning to see a lot of these projects being discussed while the terms of reference have not been finalized or signed off by the IAC. And once the terms of reference are made public, you'll see how the nations and myself, the working group within the IAC on the TOR, are pushing the agenda of our nations and making sure that communication is number one. Communication to the nations is number one. The project cannot move forward without the initial communication with the nations themselves, not through proponents. We don't meet with proponents. It's something that we've forbidden. And, we make sure that the consultation stays with the nations.
Are there any issues or sticking points in the negotiations to finalize these terms of reference?
No, it's actually been moving forward in a good way. The Canadian government and Prime Minister Carney's party have not put their fingers into the TOR. They're allowing the working group to develop the terms of reference, and they've been, to this point, they've been very understanding within the issues that we bring forward on the MOU, and also the IAC and the major projects. So it's been a good process. However, we're still concerned that they won't take our advice. So that's what we're waiting to see.
If you were in a situation where you felt like the advice wasn't being taken, how would you proceed?
Well, we've already discussed that in the internal meetings, that there's, we'd probably leave the table if our advice is not being taken. That's been one of the first and foremost comments, especially for myself as the Grand Chief of Treaty 8. I have a mandate. I have a very intricate position here that has to be respected when it comes to how we move forward with the IAC, and we're very concerned, and we make sure that any communications, even the TOR, is funneled through our legal counsel as well, to make sure that they're having input and making sure that there's no gaps in terms of reference.
Okay, last question.
Yeah, the last
and
one.
then we'll
Sure.
go on Zoom,
Yeah.
okay? We have one question.
I just was very quickly very curious. What I know that some of you, of course, met with the Prime Minister at the Assembly of First Nations meeting last week. It wasn't on the agenda, so I'm very curious as what did you have to do to get that meeting?
Well, most of the AFNs, they do have a time slot for the Prime Minister at some point in the Assembly. A lot of times it's at the end of the Assembly. A lot of times it's at the beginning of the Assembly. However, we're not afforded the agenda on exactly when he'll be there and how long he'll be there, so it creates some issues within our chiefs that would like to have some discussion with him or at least bring some points forward. And when we have a time slot of an hour and we listen to delegates, whoever speaking and, talking, it doesn't leave too much room for our chiefs to bring their issues forward. So we're looking at, changing some of the ways that AFN does things to respect the chiefs a little bit more when they come from across the country to have their issues heard.
Okay, we'll go for one question on Zoom. Okay. Alicia, the floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me in there?
Yes.
Hi, Chief Mercredi. Kind of following up on one of the questions my colleagues asked about the Indigenous Advisory Council. Are you saying that the council wasn't given a heads up or aware that this MOU was being drafted, and you guys had no input in what the terms of that MOU would be?
Absolutely, we have no input in it. We weren't communicated that it was going to happen. It's just is news to us, just as any other project. At the IAC, we do not involve ourselves in any projects. When the projects are announced is when we know about the projects, because that's between the nations, the government, and how they want to work things. And at the table there of the IAC, we were pretty adamant that we will absolutely not be engaged with proponents. We do not want to know when about the projects or upcoming projects before any of the nations. We've asked them to establish a communications office to directly communicate with each impacted nation before announcements are made. We do not involve ourselves in any of the announcements or any of the major projects that are being announced. So we hear when everybody else has heard, when the media releases them.
On that then, I'm just curious about what the role of the Indigenous Advisory Council is then. I know that the Prime Minister has said, this isn't going to sidestep consultations with affected nations, but did they not reach out and say, hey, are we going about signing this MOU the right way? What terms should we include on consultation in here? I'm just wondering about what the role of the IAC is, if not to make things smoother.
Well, the role of the IAC is to advise the federal government on how to work with the nations, and we've been putting that forward in the terms of reference. However, as stated earlier, that the terms of reference haven't been finalized, they haven't been signed off, and each member of the IAC has to sign off on that terms of reference. So it's important to know that when they made the announcement, a lot of people or organizations are looking at it as it's a part of the IAC or the MPO. Well, we weren't aware of it. Really, the MOU between Alberta and Canada is just a MOU between themselves on moving certain projects forward. We were not aware of the discussion. We were not aware of how they would like to move it forward. All I can say is that we're very concerned that they made the announcement without the nations of Treaty 8 involved.
Okay, that's all the time we have. So let's conclude the press conference. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.
Merci. Merci, sir.